Hello, everyone. Rob Garcia with Winfield United PPG. I'm on today on a Mass Tangent podcast with Kevin Leeper. I am the technical specialist for the Western United States and live here in Colorado. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, Kevin Leeper with Winfield United. I live in Minnesota, and I've worked with golf, lawn care, a little bit of pest control over the last 10 years or so with Winfield, and happy to be on with you today, Rob, for the Mass Tangent episode, Turf Edition.
So today, Kevin and I are going to go over some ideas on how to deal with the heat that we're experiencing throughout the entire United States.
It's hot in Minnesota.
Very hot in Minnesota. No rainfall in Houston, Texas. We've been getting some rain here in Colorado and Denver, but we've also been about to break our most 90-degree days. So we've had a very hot, dry summer as well. What we want to talk about today is some of the things you can do with your own lawns to help with the heat, help them get through the hot times of the season, and maintain good turf quality. So the things we're going to talk about water management, the utilization of wetting agents, to fertilize or not to fertilize, and then we're going to talk about herbicide efficacy and getting better weed control in these hot times of the year. So the first thing we're going to talk about is water management. Everyone in many parts of the country has to water some way. Even in areas where we traditionally get a lot of rainfall, we're still seeing people water more and more. I know, Kevin, you guys, not everyone has irrigation in Minnesota, correct?
Yeah, it's historically you haven't needed it unless you live on a very sandy part of the state. So where I live in just west of Minneapolis, I've got a couple of pretty big shaded trees that, keep my lawn cool. I don't have to water as often as somebody that has full sun in their yard. But I do not have irrigation, and I got to get out every once in a while and hand water or make sure that I'm setting up the sprinkler, keep the grass alive.
So when we're trying to manage our water, trying to do a better job, keep the grass alive, like Kevin mentioned, we can utilize wetting agents, soil surfactants, to be able to help us with that, trying to keep the plant as healthy as possible. So some real basics about wetting agents are basically think about the soil as a hydrophobic media, and then the water is hydrophilic. So the plant wants water, but the soil doesn't want to take the water in. So a good way to think about a wetting agent is it's a molecule that has a polar end and a non-polar end. The water is polar, wants to attach to that end. The non-polar end likes to attach to the soil. So in a sense, they attach and they're able to hold water. There's a couple different types of wetting agents. So do you want to go into the difference between a retention versus penetrant? There you go.
So industry has a few different types of wetting agents. Like Rob mentioned, you've got penetrant and you've got retention, otherwise described as vertical or horizontal type of spreaders and wetters. So the penetrant is going to be a vertical wetter, and it's going to soak the column and break that hydrophobic tension right at the top of the soil and help move the water through the soil column. The lateral or retainers kind of keep the water in the root zone where it's available to the plant to be taken up.
And I think these are important for the homeowner, the do-it-yourself lawn care type of a person to understand that in a lot of areas we have very, very heavy clay soils. So when we water, the water tends to like to sit on the top. It's a very tight pore space. Doesn't want to move down into the soil. So the utilization of these types of products will help us move the water down. Now, in my part of the country especially, we're under water restrictions. So most of the people throughout the metro area along the Front Range of Colorado, they can only really water 2 to 3 times per week. So we're having multiple 90-degree days. So when we water, they're also restricted on when they can water. So we have to be able to get what water we are allowed to put out down into the soil. And then like Kevin mentioned, with the retention products, if we're in a part of the country that has very sandy soils, and we have bands of that throughout the entire United States, we want to be able to hold the water, because when we water, the water penetrates into soil more easily than the clay soils, but we want to hold it there in the root zone so that the plant can take the water in and be able to utilize our irrigation cycles. We also want to look at methods of application. Now, we have many types of products here at Winfield PPG. We have products that you're able to put down as a liquid application. So essentially we spray them onto the soil, water them in, they stay in the soil for a given amount of time. We also have methods of application where we can utilize these little wetting agent pellets. So you hook it to a hose end applicator, put the pellet into it, and you can treat the areas throughout your yard. So a nice, easy way to put it down. We are also starting to work with and carry some granular type products. I think this is a great way for people to put down wetting agents at their home turf. They're easy to apply. People are more used to utilizing granulars. So that's something that we can use to help us with our applications. You'll be able to go out, look around your yard. You see the areas that we have stress. We can go out, we can apply the granular, we can utilize the chemistry, water it in, and get the same types of results that we would with a liquid application. The next thing that we want to talk about is fertilization. And
hold on, Rob. I want to get back, because you were talking about the wetting agent, and that's can be very useful for somebody that doesn't have irrigation like myself. Sure, so somebody that maybe doesn't have the capabilities to go out and hand water, or doesn't have a sprinkler or a sprinkler system, the wetting agents can be very useful, because you go out and you spread it or you spray it with the liquid applications. And when you do get that rainfall, it soaks in and can be, utilized for the next month or so. So if you don't have an irrigation system, probably should look into some type of wetting agent product to utilize on your yard.
Now, would you consider that more like a preventative application then, Kevin, planning ahead, because you don't have water, you don't have an irrigation system, you might have a period where you're having some dry, consistent weather's forecast, so you can preventatively go out so that when you do get either rainfall or hand water, manually water your turf, you're able to get good performance out of that and usage out of that water cycle.
Yeah, 100%. You got to be preventative. And a good way to think about it too is, with cool season turf, we have the growth cycle that kind of looks like a camel. So yep. Spring, you get that shoot growth, and you also get the root growth at the bottom that kind of mirrors it. In the summer, when it gets really hot, your roots are going to shrink and your shoot growth isn't going to be as much. So you really want to be preventative and proactive with your wetting agent management, getting those roots built down into the soil as far as you can, so that when you do come into those warm summer months, you've got that root system built that can go and look for water in deeper parts of the soil.
And that's a great point, Kevin, because that kind of leads into our next topic, and the topic of to fertilize or not fertilize. And you mentioned the cycle for cool season turf grass, where we have a good growth activity in the spring. We have that low point. We have some root mass loss because of the heat. I've seen some numbers where anytime it gets into the 90s, we actually start to lose root mass. And remember, we're dealing with all kinds of different heights of cut. So if we're in shorter heights of cut, then we're going to lose more root mass because we actually have less. So a lot of people ask about, what should I be doing in the summer? Should I be fertilizing? And really, it's a good time to back off and utilize. If you want to fertilize, utilize some organics, something that's really slow to break down, help with the soil structure. Organics also do help naturally hold more water in the root zone. So that's a good time to put them down. But I always do recommend people fertilizing. If they want to fertilize in summer, stay away from quick release nitrogen. I mean, when you put quick release down, as you said, the plant's at a low point. It's not utilizing the nitrogen and the other nutrients that we're putting down. So putting them down in a form that they're not going to be volatilized, they're not going to be leached away, that's a good time to use slow release and especially organic-based products to fertilize.
Is there specific organic products that you recommend, Rob?
I like to, this time of the year, I like to utilize products. The poultry waste products are great. The sustain type products. Biosolids are very popular and very easy to come by throughout the United States. Also, it's a good time of the year if you do have liquid application capability, or find a good granular source. Humates are another thing to put down. They're a naturally occurring compound. They come from leonardite shale. They have a lot of ability and a lot of bonding sites on the molecule to be able to hold on to more water. So any of these carbon-based organic sources are going to be good to help with your soil structure. If you have sandy soil, they're going to help you have more ability to hold water. I mean, you look at what's in, say, a sand greens mix. It's sand and an organic source to help hold on to some water. So we can do that in our home lawns if we're dealing with a sandy soil.
Is somebody going to have to expect to put down more pounds per 1,000 square feet of these organic products?
Really you are, because, traditionally when we look at the blends that we make, the fertilizers we traditionally put down throughout the rest of the season, they have 20 to 30% nitrogen. Most of these organic sources are 4 to 6. So you need to put down, if you're going to go down with a half a pound, in a lot of cases, the calculation for how much total material to put down is going to be about, it's going to be about 10 pounds. If you want to get a full pound of nitrogen out of an organic source, and many of them I've calculated this with customers before, it's as much as 20 pounds per 1,000. So you definitely need to plan to put more product down. Now that's nice because you get really good coverage. We get lots of material to potentially help with our water management because of the carbon-based organic molecule.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I also want to jump back a second. This is a mass tangent conversation. So going off on tangents here. Seed selection and turf variety can play a big role in drought stress, any type of stress really. With these new varieties, you can get better spring green up, you can get better drought tolerance, deeper root systems potentially. So what have you seen in the seed market as far as new varieties and being able to kind of go out and manage your water use with these new varieties?
So I'm gonna mention something that's called the NTEP trials, and that's the National Turfgrass Experimental Plots, and they do trials all over the United States. So they look at the varieties, and then they specifically look at the different characteristics. Now this is all data-based, and we have a really cool software package here at Winfield called the Turf Tech tool that we can look at different things. So for my part of the country, especially because we've been under drought for so long, we will look at exactly what types of ryegrass, bluegrass, fescues, etc., and look at what their best characteristics are. So drought tolerance. One of the other things that we see that kind of comes along with drought is salts. Our water isn't as good a quality as it was when we had a higher volume to utilize. So we look for salt tolerance, drought tolerance, heat tolerance. And in the NTEP trials, all those characteristics are looked at for cool season turfgrass now. So we can utilize the tools that we have to be able to essentially choose a type that best fits our situation. And I think that type of a question, we've had some people asking about what our best quality fescue or tall turf type fescue is. So we're starting to see those questions be asked by the public so that when they plant the turf, they have a variety that doesn't use quite as much water as maybe what was planted 5 to 10 years ago.
So managing heat stress really goes all the way back to the beginning of, checking your soil, knowing if you have sandy, clay, loam type soil, how often you're going to need to plant to water, but also picking the right seed or turf type for your situation. And Winfield has really good options with the Turf Tech tool, being able to build our blends in the bag, and then also coating all that seed with PGS, which is a root stimulant, and really helps drive those roots, especially right off of germination.
And get the most efficient establishment possible, getting that seed up, getting a good root system developed. And we can tweak our fertilizers in the spring when we do that to try to get as strong of a turfgrass stand as possible, so that when we get into these drought times of the year, we're able to withstand them, get past those couple of months of really hard, hot, dry weather, and then get into the fall. Again, get to that second part of the cool season turf grasses time of year where it wants to really actively grow, put lots of energy and carbohydrates into the root system, which will then get you through the winter. So you get into a nice cycle, you get into a nice healthy plant so that we're not losing turf quality and root mass in those hard times of the year.
And it's also been said, getting into your next point, which is herbicides, that the best defense against weeds is a healthy turf stand. So if you have a nice, dense turf canopy, you're going to expect fewer weeds throughout the season, and you're not going to potentially have some of these issues where you're like freaking out about what herbicide do I need to use when it's 95 degrees outside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I get asked about clover all the time. And it's interesting because clover actually, because it's a legume able to make its own nitrogen, it thrives in a low nitrogen situation. So many times, if you have a clover issue, fertilizing a little bit more, maybe increasing the rate or the frequency will help you get rid of some of the weeds. And going back to what Kevin said, it allows you to have a healthier stand, less weeds. A tighter, denser canopy is going to definitely help limit the weed seed germination and the establishment of the weeds. So with herbicides, that's probably one of the more common questions that we get this time of the year is, I made a herbicide application and I'm just not getting the control that I did earlier in the season when I made my first application in the spring. What we're seeing here is that as we get into the time of the year, just like the turf grass, where the turf is starting to shut down, we're losing root mass. It's not utilizing the nutrition that we're applying to it. It's looking for water. So it's kind of in a semi-dormant state. The weeds do the same thing. So the weeds will start to, that we're trying to control, especially perennial broadleaf. They'll go into a stage in the summer where they close their pore space off, so we can't translocate our foliar herbicides. The majority of the herbicides that we're utilizing are foliar systemic-based products. So some of the things that we can do is when we look at the labels, we can apply at a higher rate. And to be able to do that, we need to stay within the label rates, but we can go to the max rate. We probably got good control at a middle rate early in the season, but during the summer, we might need to increase the rate to be able to get good control. We need to put out more carrier, and that's sometimes hard because people have different types of spray equipment. But essentially, if we can put more carrier out, get better coverage, we're going to be more likely to get these herbicides to translocate into the weeds, eventually be translocated down into the root system and control the weed. Some of the other things we need to do is to add a surfactant to the tank. So because we have rain events every day and many parts of the country, we're not sure of the weather, Winfield has a good line of surfactants that we can utilize to help improve our herbicide performance. So when you're looking at a herbicide, always read the label, look for any comments that the manufacturer makes about utilizing a surfactant. Kevin, you want to go just briefly into some of the types of surfactants that we have here at Winfield PPG?
For sure, yeah. Probably our most popular one and the one that's the most fun to talk about is Droplex. Droplex is a product that allows for consistent droplet size out of the nozzle, and you don't have to put too much in your tank. You're only looking at about 6 to 10 ounces per acre, and you need to be careful if you have a low volume piece of equipment, maybe reducing that rate even a little bit more. But for normal equipment, 6 to 10 ounces per acre should get you just fine. It's going to reduce drift because you're creating consistent droplets out of the nozzle, and you're going to get better coverage on the plant because each droplet is about the same size. It's going to hit the plant. It's going to stick a little bit. You're not going to roll off like you would if you had just water or maybe a polymer type of product that it creates thicker droplets coming out of the nozzle, can hit the foliage and just fall to the soil. And the next one to talk about would be Gulfstream Free. This is a non-ionic surfactant. It's got a few other features as well. It's got some buffering, some UV protectant, as well as a little bit of anti-foam. And this is a great product to use for herbicide control. You go out and you spray it. You're going to be able to see it sticking onto the leaf. You're going to get better uptake because the product is able to work into the plant material a little bit better. And the last one to touch on, well, maybe not the last one, but one of the other ones to talk about is Droplex Extra, which is a combination of those two products. So it's got the drift control and it's got the spreader sticker from the non-ionic surfactant. Maybe another one to bring up. shouldn't have said last one, is atmos or turbulence. So an MSO, especially in the hot parts of the summer when you're trying to control some grassy weeds and you want to put out some quinclorac or some drive, adding an MSO to your spray tank is really going to increase the efficacy of that product to control the crabgrass.
And, that's one of the things when you mention MSO is that I see more and more labels, especially in the southern part of the United States, that where they have a little bit harder to control grassy weed problem, nutsedge, and some of these other issues. The products that are utilized for those, they actually ask specifically for MSO over some of the other products that you've mentioned. So, again, back to always read the label, figure out how we can increase the performance. One of the other things that I want to talk about with herbicides is application timing. Spraying in the morning is always going to do a better job than spraying in any other time of the day. One, it's going to be cooler temperatures. The pore space on the weeds are going to be more open because they've been respirating and transpiring throughout the night. So that's a good time to catch them and get them. If we spray later in the day, that pore space is closed off. So we're not going to get the control that we're looking for. And I think that's sometimes why we see decrease in performance as the day gets warmer. Now, the other thing to note is that all of these products have a temperature range that they need to be applied. So the majority of products, when you get above 85, that's going to be the upper temperature threshold to make an application. So we want it to be below that temperature for at least the next couple hours. And again, the surfactants that Kevin mentioned are going to help with that performance. But we want to be able to, make our application and then not volatilize. One of the things that I've seen repeatedly throughout the years working in the lawn care industry is offsite damage. Applicator makes an application. It's too hot. He's above the temperature range for the herbicide that he's using. And he starts to volatilize. It moves off site. We have damage to perennials, flowers, ornamentals, etc. So we want to limit that. So the utilization, again, of the surfactants that Kevin's talked about and also spraying at the right timing is going to really help. The last thing I want to talk about with herbicides is, consider the formulation. And when it gets hotter, look for the amines. Look for things with a low amount of material in the tank. Tenacity would be a great example of a post-emergent herbicide. Very, very low rates, less likelihood for damage. So go from the esters to the amines. Essentially think about your herbicides, esters for the spring and the fall, amines for the hotter time of the summer. Try to look for a product that has the highest temperature range, and then also look at some of these newer products that have very, very low rates. So when you're making spot spray applications, there's really not a whole lot of herbicide to do damage to other, our offsite plants and landscape than we would if we had a higher concentration ester in the tank. So just some real good things to consider when making herbicide applications.
And it doesn't take a whole lot of herbicide either. You don't have to sit there and soak the weed to get control.
And that's a good, we've had some questions the last couple of days, Kevin and I were answering about how much to put out. And there was some misinformation that Kevin was given. They essentially wanted to soak the area. Well, that's going to create some phytotoxicity. Again, these labels are set up so that we have plant safety at the rates that are on the label. If we go outside that, products that could be labeled as a selective broadleaf herbicide to be used on the turf grass species that you are treating will damage the turf. So again, and I say this over and over again, read the label.
That's for sure. I do have another quick tangent that I wanted to bring up. For those of you that have iPhones, if you take a picture of a plant and you don't know what it is, you can swipe up on the photo and there's an option that says look up the plant, and it'll bring up a couple of options of what that plant could be. So just a really neat feature, especially in the weed herbicide or the weed ID and herbicide discussion, being able to figure out what weed are you trying to make an application for and determining the best product to control that weed. That can be a really cool feature.
Great information. Yeah. Again, weed identification is hard. We're all over the country. Some weeds are here, some weeds are there. But at the end of the day, identifying the weed that we're trying to control will allow us to choose the correct herbicide and also the correct formulation for that time of the year. So, well, I think that covers everything that Kevin and I wanted to go over today. Again, thanks for watching the podcast. And if you have any questions, feel free to utilize the Winfield website to send us any of your questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.